Good day to you and welcome to another Paddocks Club video tutorial. Today I'd like to talk to you about the issue of security system keys and remotes and the value of developing policies in this regard. We all know that in the management and administration of a sectional title scheme, the trustees are bound by the provisions of the Act and also, of course, of their scheme's rules. But there are issues such as the issuance of keys and remotes for a security system that aren't dealt with in either the Act or the rules. These are the day-to-day details of issues that need to be handled by the trustees. I came across a situation recently in which a section had recently been sold. The letting agent, who was instructed by the person about to take transfer, addressed a letter to the chairperson saying, please can I have 3 sets of keys and remotes? And the immediate response to the chairperson is, I'm afraid we've already issued 3 sets of keys and remotes for this flat. What's happened? And the letting agent came back and said, no, look, they've been lost. We need 3 more sets. The chairperson was a bit suspicious about all this, so he went onto the letting agent's website and found that this flat, as yet not transferred, was being advertised as being available for short-term rentals, specifically for rentals of between 2 and 10 days. And in addition to the flat being available on that basis, they were offering cleaning services and various other sorts of services. Now, this put an entirely new light on this request for new keys. And obviously there was a fear amongst the trustees that there would be security issues because of what appeared to be a short-term letting intention. Now, whether short-term letting was allowed or should be allowed in the scheme isn't the subject of today's tutorial, but what is important is that the trustees realized now that the agent, that a set of cleaners and the various other service providers would have access and would have keys to the entire complex as well as to this particular flat. In this particular scheme, they had fairly sophisticated security arrangements. The keys are the type that can't be copied. They can only be issued by the people who make the keys, and that is by arrangement only on body corporate instructions. And all the remotes for the for the gate systems are identifiable, and each one can be deactivated. So the question arose, what was the trustees' policy in regard to the issue of remotes and keys? Well, after some scratching of heads, they realized that they actually did have a policy. They'd never written it down, though. And their policy was that they would issue 1 set of keys and remotes to each adult occupant. Anybody over 13 who lived in the scheme could have a key and a remote. They also, for that purpose, kept a list of the occupants of the sections in the scheme, and they kept a list of the keys issued and remotes. And when remotes were lost, they were deactivated individually before another one was issued in its place. And if keys were lost, they asked for explanations to see whether they thought there was a security breach. Had the key disappeared at the same time that a domestic servant had been terminated, or was there some suspicious thing? And if necessary, they would change all the keys. Of course, that meant huge inconvenience as well as cost. And the issue of cost was also something that wasn't quite settled in their minds, but they certainly didn't want other people to have to pay for somebody's negligence. So what in the end was decided was that they would take all these ideas that they had been applying and they would write them down as a policy. And the advantage of doing this in those circumstances is that you then have a properly thought out strategy to deal with what can happen with remotes and keys. And then when you are hit suddenly, sometimes an individual trustee is hit with a request, you can say, look, we'll apply the policy. And this is what the policy says in this particular regard. If you do choose to decide to make such a policy, it should certainly be published to owners and occupiers. If it's unreasonable, of course, if they think it unreasonable, owners can direct the trustees to change the policy. But on the other hand, if it's not going to change, if it's a very sensible policy, which may not only be in regard to keys, but as to how refuse must be placed in a central place and how refuse bins must be recollected, that type of thing, you can incorporate that into a conduct rule. Thank you for joining me in this tutorial. If you have any questions, let's talk about them in the discussion forum.